The restaurant had a waiting list that stretched 40 minutes on a Thursday evening, but that didn't seem to matter to the man in the gray blazer who walked straight past everyone and settled himself at the host's podium like he owned the building. Elara Quinn had been standing near the back of the line for 25 minutes, still in her hospital scrubs, her hair pulled into a messy bun that had lost its shape somewhere around hour 11 of her shift. She had a coffee stain on her left sleeve that she kept trying to cover with her jacket, and her feet hurt in the particular way that only comes from 12 hours on a tile floor. She hadn't eaten since 7 that morning. She was 31 years old, and she was tired in a way that went all the way down to her bones. She wasn't there for anything fancy. The restaurant Clementine's was a mid-range place on Elgin Street in Ottawa, the kind of spot that had exposed brick and a chalkboard menu and thought very highly of itself for a Tuesday, let alone a Thursday. But her best friend Danny had picked it, and Danny was already inside at the bar, texting her increasingly frantic messages about a mushroom flatbread that was apparently worth every minute of the wait. Elara was almost at the front when the man in the gray blazer turned around and really looked at her for the first time. His name, she would learn later, was Renfield. He was the sort of man who wore a blazer to a casual restaurant and expected to be thanked for the effort. He had the kind of confidence that lives entirely in the chin, carried high, tilted slightly back, and the expression of someone who had never once questioned whether a room wanted him in it. He looked at her scrubs. He looked at her coffee stain. He looked at the way her ID badge was still clipped to her chest. Saint. Michael's Regional RN Quinn E. And something shifted in his face. Not curiosity, something closer to distaste. "Are you here for a delivery?" he said. Elara blinked. "Sorry, a delivery, or are you picking something up?" He gestured vaguely toward the back of the restaurant. "The staff entrance is around the side." The woman behind Elara in line made a small, sharp sound. Someone else went very quiet. Elara felt heat climb the back of her neck. She was too tired to be graceful about it. "I'm here to meet a friend," she said. "For dinner." The man's expression didn't change. "Right." He said it the way people say right when they mean "I don't believe you." Then he turned back to the host and said, loudly, "I called ahead. Party of 4, Renfield." The host, a young woman who looked mortified, glanced at Elara with an apologetic wince. "Sir, this guest was ahead of you in the queue." "I called ahead," he repeated, as though the host hadn't spoken. Elara stood there. She could feel everyone in the line watching. She thought about saying something. She thought about the 12-hour shift, about the woman in room 7 she'd sat with for 40 minutes because the woman was scared and had no family who'd come, about the IV line she'd reset 3 times, and the doctor's orders she'd questioned and been right to question, and the paperwork and the aching feet and the coffee stain and the fact that she was hungry and she had done nothing to deserve this moment. She didn't say anything. She just stepped aside. That was her first mistake, she thought later. Or maybe it wasn't a mistake. Maybe it was just what exhaustion looks like when it's been going on long enough. She found Danny at the bar, and Danny took one look at her face and said, "What happened?" "It wasn't a question," Elara told her. Danny's expression went through several stages in rapid succession: concern, confusion, and then a very particular kind of controlled fury that Elara had learned to recognize over 15 years of friendship. "Point him out," Danny said. "Don't. I'm not going to do anything. I just want to see him. Danny, I'm looking with my eyes, Elara. That's all." Elara pointed, reluctantly, toward the table near the window, where the man in the gray blazer had been seated, ahead of everyone, just as he'd intended. He was with 3 other people, all of them with the same particular brand of loud self-assurance, laughing at something on someone's phone. Danny looked at him for a long moment. "He's not even good-looking," she said finally, as though this were a personal failing on his part. Elara almost laughed. Almost. They were seated eventually, at a table toward the back, which was fine. The flatbread was genuinely good. Elara ordered a glass of wine she probably didn't need and definitely wanted, and for a while the evening moved on the way evenings do. Conversation running easy and warm, the restaurant noise settling into a kind of comfortable hum around them. And then she heard the voice again. She wasn't sure what made her look up. Maybe it was just the volume of it. That particular register of a man who has never learned to calibrate how much space his voice takes up. Renfield was standing now, near the edge of his table, gesturing at someone. One of the restaurant servers, A young guy, couldn't have been more than 20, was standing very still in the way that young people stand when they're being spoken to badly by someone older, and they haven't yet decided whether they're allowed to object to it. I ordered the halibut, Renfield was saying, and this is clearly not halibut. I don't know what this is. I need you to take it back, and I need you to explain to me how something like this happens in a place that charges these prices. The server said something quiet. Elara couldn't hear it. That's not an answer, Renfield said. Danny had gone quiet beside her. Elara watched the server's face. She recognized that look. She'd worn it herself years ago in a different life. Summers waitressing at a lodge outside Huntsville, learning early that some customers treat service workers as people and some do not, and that the ones who do not are indistinguishable from the ones who do until the moment something inconveniences them. She was still watching when the door opened. She didn't notice him at first. The door opened and a man walked in, and that was all it was. A man, tall in civilian clothes, dark jacket and jeans, hair cut short and neat in the way that suggests habit more than style. He stood at the host's podium with his hands loose at his sides and looked around the room with the particular unhurried attentiveness of someone who is always, slightly, taking inventory. What she noticed first, actually, was the dog. He was on a short lead, a dark Belgian Malinois, compact and alert, with the kind of intelligent stillness that says, I am waiting, and I am ready, and I know exactly what I'm waiting for. He had a vest on, working dog, the kind you didn't approach without permission. The host said something to the man. He said something back. Then he scanned the room again and found what he was looking for, and he started walking. He was walking toward Elara's table. She felt Danny's hand close around her arm. Elara, Danny said. Is that yeah? Elara said. That's Theo. Theo Marchetti was 34 years old and had been a member of Joint Task Force 2 for 6 years before a training injury grounded him and redirected him, with the particular lateral logic of the Canadian Armed Forces, into a role as a K-9 handler with the RCMP's Major Crimes Unit in Ottawa. He was quiet in the way of people who have learned that words cost something and should be spent carefully. He was not, on the whole, a man who raised his voice. He didn't need to. He was also, as of 14 months ago, Elara's partner. They had met at a hospital, which she found either fitting or ironic depending on the day. He'd come in with a colleague who'd taken a bad fall during a training exercise, and Elara had been the nurse on that floor, and he had been politely, almost excessively, grateful for the care his colleague received. He'd come back the next day with coffee for the nursing staff and a thank you card that he'd clearly written himself in handwriting that was small and careful and slightly more legible than you'd expect, from someone who looked like he could carry a refrigerator up a flight of stairs without stopping. Danny had told her to give him her number. She had in fact gone home and spent 2 days convincing herself not to. Then she had. The dog's name was Fen. He was a 7-year-old Belgian Malinois with a record of service that was frankly more impressive than most people Elara knew, and he regarded her with a dignified tolerance that she found unreasonably very moving. Theo arrived at the table. He looked at her. He looked at Danny. He looked briefly at the direction she'd been looking. Traffic was bad, he said. It's fine, Elara said. Sit down. He sat. Fen settled under the table with the precision of an animal that has done this before and finds it acceptable. A server arrived almost immediately, a different one from the young man by Renfield's table, and took Theo's jacket and handled the dog's presence with practiced efficiency, noting the service vest and moving on. They ordered. The conversation resumed, slower now. The three of them, Danny asking Theo about a case he couldn't really talk about, Theo answering in the particular non-answers that told you he found the conversation enjoyable even if he couldn't share the content. Elara ate her flatbread and let the evening settle back into something manageable. She had almost forgotten about Renfield entirely when it happened. She heard a crash, not a dramatic one, a glass, something ceramic, the particular sharp sound of something fragile hitting tile. Then a voice, too loud, pitched to be heard. You need to watch where you're going. This jacket cost more than you make in a month. The server, the young one, the same young one, was standing at the edge of Renfield's table with an empty tray and a look on his face that was trying very hard to be neutral and was not quite managing it. There was a small spill on the tablecloth. The glass had rolled and not broken, but a sauce dish had. The server was saying something, low and controlled. Renfield stood up. I want the manager, he said, right now. And I want this taken off our bill, all of it, because this is the second time tonight this kid has been in my way, and I don't. Sir, the word wasn't loud, it wasn't aggressive. It didn't need to be either of those things, because it had a quality to it that cut through the restaurant noise with the efficient cleanness of something that has been trained into a person over years of necessity. The ability to make one word land like a full sentence. Theo was standing. Elara hadn't seen him stand. She hadn't heard him move his chair. She was aware, suddenly and completely, that he was no longer beside her. He was beside Renfield. Not close. There was nothing threatening in his proximity, nothing that could be called intimidation by anyone paying fair attention. He was simply standing, in the way of someone who has decided that a thing is going to stop happening and has positioned himself accordingly. Fen was at his left heel. The dog wasn't growling. He wasn't even visibly tense. He was simply there, with his dark eyes and his working vest and his 7 years of whatever it is that working dogs accumulate, and something about that presence made the space around Renfield's table feel abruptly different. Renfield turned. He looked at Theo. He looked at the dog. Something moved through his expression, not quite fear, but adjacent to it. The recalibration of a man who has just understood that the room has changed. "This young man," Theo said, and his voice was level and completely without heat, "apologized to you. Twice, from what I heard." Renfield blinked. "I don't know who you." The glass slipped. "It happens." Theo looked at the server, a glance, brief, acknowledging. Then back to Renfield. "You've been speaking to the staff here in a way that isn't appropriate. I'd like that to stop. I'm sorry, I don't know who you think you are." "Marchetti," Theo said, calmly. "Corporal, RCMP." He didn't show a badge. He didn't need to. There was something in his bearing, in the economy of his movements and the steadiness of his gaze and the particular way Fen held himself at his side, that assets itself in the room into something unmistakable. Renfield's jaw tightened. His eyes dropped to Fen again, then back up. "I wasn't doing anything illegal," he said. "No," Theo agreed. "But you were being unkind, in a public space, to people who were doing their jobs." He paused. "That's worth stopping." The silence lasted about 4 seconds. It felt longer. Then one of the women at Renfield's table said quietly, Derek Renfield sat down. Theo returned to the table. He sat down. He picked up his water glass. He looked at Elara. "Sorry," he said. "Where were we?" Danny stared at him. "Where were Theo? Where were you?" "You just..." She gestured back toward Renfield's table. "He was being rude to that server," Theo said, as though this explained everything, because to him it did. Elara looked at him. She looked at Fen, who had resumed his position under the table with the serene efficiency of an animal that considers this matter closed. She looked back at Theo. "He said something to me too," she said, "earlier, before you got here." Theo's gaze settled on her. "What did he say?" She told him. Briefly, the way she'd told Danny, the blazer, the cue, the staff entrance comment, the way he'd said right in that particular way. Theo was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You should have called me. I wasn't going to call you over something like that. Why not?" "Because it's not. It was just rude. People are rude. You can't call in the RCMP every time someone's rude to you." "I'm not the RCMP right now," Theo said. "I'm your partner. There's a difference." Elara looked at him. She felt something in her chest do a thing she didn't have a clean word for. The particular sensation of being seen and taken seriously by someone whose opinion you've learned to trust. "He thought I was making a delivery," she said. Theo nodded once, slowly, the way he did when he was listening and wanted you to know he was listening. "Because of the scrubs," she said. "Yes, I had my badge on. I know. I'd been at work since 6:45 in the morning. I know." She looked down at the coffee stain on her sleeve. She pulled her jacket over it, the reflex still there, even now, even here. "I just let it go," she said. "I just stepped aside. And I keep thinking, why did I do that? Why didn't I say anything?" "Because you were tired," Theo said, "and you'd just come off a long shift. And sometimes when someone says something like that to you, in a public place, the easiest thing to do is make yourself smaller so it ends faster. That's not a failure. That's just how it works sometimes." "But it shouldn't." "No," he said. "It shouldn't. He was wrong. What he said was wrong, and the way he said it was wrong, and the assumption behind it was wrong." A pause. "That doesn't mean you were wrong for how you handled it." Danny was very quiet. Elara realized her eyes had gotten warm. She looked up at the ceiling for a second, the way she did when she needed to reset, and then she looked back at Theo and said, "You're making it worse." "I know," he said, but his mouth had done the thing it did occasionally, the small, careful movement in one corner that counted as a smile. "Do you want the rest of that flatbread, or can I have it?" She pushed the plate toward him. What happened next, she didn't entirely plan. She went to the restroom. On the way back, she stopped. The young server was standing near the back hallway, collecting himself. He looked up when he heard her footsteps and tried immediately to assemble a professional expression. "Hey," Elara said. "Are you okay?" The server, his name tag said Joel, looked like he was 20, maybe 21, with the kind of face that hadn't finished settling into itself yet. He said, "Yeah, totally fine. Sorry about the disruption." "Don't apologize to me," Elara said. "You didn't do anything." Joel looked at her. His professional expression wobbled. "The guy at that table said something to me earlier too," Elara said, "before I was even seated. He thought I was a delivery person." She touched her badge, still clipped to her chest. "I'm a nurse. I'd just come off a 12-hour shift." Joel blinked. "I'm not telling you that so you can say something polite about it," she added. "I'm telling you because I saw what just happened, and I know that feeling, the one where someone is being awful to you and you're trapped in a job where you can't say what you actually think, and you just have to absorb it. I know that feeling, and it's not fair." Joel was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "He's been in before. He's always like that. Some people are. It's fine. I can handle it." "I know you can," Elara said. "I know you can handle it. That's not the point. The point is you shouldn't have to." She paused. "You're doing a good job. Tonight was not your fault." Joel nodded. His jaw was doing the tight, controlled thing of someone trying not to have a visible reaction in a public place. Elara recognized that too. She said goodnight and went back to the table. When they left, she, Theo, Danny, Fenn, they passed Renfield's table. He was talking to someone on his phone, loud and important, his jacket back on, the incident seemingly filed away or forgotten. He didn't look up. At the door, the host, the young woman who'd given Elara that apologetic wince at the beginning of the evening, stopped them. "I'm sorry," she said, directly to Elara. "About earlier. He shouldn't have said that to you." Elara looked at her. "No, he shouldn't have. Your dinner's been comped. The manager wanted you to know. You didn't have to do that. We wanted to." The host looked at Theo and then at Fenn with an expression that was difficult to classify, somewhere between gratitude and something quieter. "Thank you," she said to him, "for saying something." Theo nodded once. "He'll think twice next time," he said simply. Outside on Elgin Street, the September air had gone cool and clean. Ottawa in the fall had that particular quality of light that made everything look a little more deliberate than it probably was. Danny pulled her coat tighter and made some comment about getting dessert somewhere, and Theo was already looking at his phone, checking something, and Fenn walked at his left side with the patient reliability of an animal that knows exactly where it belongs. Elara stood on the pavement for a moment and let the evening air do its work. She thought about the woman in room 7. She thought about 12 hours of keeping watch over other people's difficult days while her own accumulated in the margins. She thought about the coffee stain she'd kept trying to hide, and the way she'd stepped aside, and the way Theo had simply stood up. Not for drama, not for spectacle, but because a thing had been wrong and needed to stop. She thought about Joel and the way his face had done what it did, and what she'd said to him about being capable of handling something not being the same as being required to. She hadn't planned to say that. It had just come out. But it had been true. Theo appeared beside her, not dramatically. He was just there, the way he tended to be, efficient, present, unhurried. "You okay?" he said. She looked at him. She looked at Fenn, who was watching a pigeon with focused professional attention. "Yeah," she said. "I'm okay." She meant it this time. They walked to the corner, the four of them, and the city went on around them the way cities do, indifferent and constant and alive. And Elara Quinn, registered nurse, 12-hour shift veteran, woman in scrubs who had been asked if she was making a delivery, tucked her hand into the crook of Theo Marchetti's arm and decided that the evening had ended correctly after all. Not perfectly, not with Renfield apologizing or the universe offering anything so tidy as justice. Just correctly. With someone having said, plainly and without theater, that a thing was wrong and should stop. With a server named Joel who would go home tonight having been told by a stranger that what happened to him wasn't fair. with a dog named Fen who had stood quietly in a restaurant and been, somehow, exactly enough. Sometimes that's what it looks like. Not a reckoning, just a person standing up at the right moment and saying, no further. And sometimes that's enough.